is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us at WZRD via Zoom, Steve Kikoen. He is a member and founder of the band Beatles tribute band Abbey Road. How are you, Steve?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on.
Great to have you. Okay, first of all, tell us what is different from with your band from other Beatles tribute bands?
Oh, sure. Well, Abbey Road sort of differentiates itself from other tributes because we're not doing the look-alike thing. We're
Mhm.
just doing a sound-alike thing, although we look pretty good. Um, but what's really interesting is we have a rock band and a chamber orchestra. So we combine orchestra with rock band, which you don't see very often.
Yes. And so what you're saying is that the orchestra is part of the tribute band as well? Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's correct. We have violins, cellos, flutes, um, trumpet, trombone, saxophone. So it's wonderful because, of course, anybody that knows about the Beatles would know that their mentor George Martin turned them onto the orchestra about halfway through their career, and of course they had stopped touring by then, so they never toured with their orchestra. But we are, so we're providing that, and the reaction from the audiences has been just fabulous.
Mm. How many members are in the orchestra?
Well, we have it, like I said, it's a chamber orchestra,
Mhm.
so it's on the smaller side.
Mhm.
There's a total of six. We've got six. We've got three string players and three horn players, but one of them also doubles on flute.
Mm. Wow. And how are they dressed then? And how are all of you dressed when you are playing?
Oh yeah, we just wear our favorite gig clothes.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and when did the Beatles start they wanted to incorporate the orchestra. You said that they were not able to follow through with it, right?
Well, yeah, they had stopped touring.
Hmm.
Beatlemania got to be such a big a deal and so restrictive of their privacy that they stopped touring and just decided to stay in the recording studio and learn from their wonderful mentor, George Martin, their producer.
Hmm.
And then, so it was somewhere around 1965, 66, with the recording of the song Yesterday, where all of a sudden a string quartet, was put on for Sir Paul McCartney, that they started experimenting with classical instruments. And then that came well into fruition around 1967 with Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, that famous, iconic, groundbreaking album. And then they continued through the rest of their career.
Well, the orchestration was in, to supplement the songs instead of the other way around. So uh, what made the orchestra portion so appropriate with the songs?
Well, it was just something like, for example,
Mhm.
Paul McCartney was at home watching a Bach Brandenburg concerto by, I believe, the London Symphony Orchestra on television. And when he heard that Bach trumpet, that piccolo trumpet, it was so impressive to him. Most people hear it at weddings, in a wedding ceremony, that very, very high trumpet that's difficult to play. And he went into the recording sessions the next day and asked his producer, George. He said he heard just a terribly high trumpet, and could we incorporate that into the song that they were just getting ready to record, which was Penny Lane. And so therein lies, and the rest is history. They used the piccolo trumpet. It didn't occur to George Martin, but it occurred to Paul. And Paul sort of sang the notes he thought would be appropriate.
Mhm.
And they got the guy from the London Symphony Orchestra to come down and play piccolo trumpet. And
Mm.
then fast forward a couple of years, and they put the entire orchestra into the Abbey Road studios. And that's where we get our name, of course. Abbey Road was the name of what was then called EMI Studios, but we call it the room where it happened, where all that magic happened, is what they renamed Abbey Road, and that's our name.
Mhm. So there was an Abbey Road, and the studio happened to be situated on Abbey Road.
That's right.
Mm. How long have you been doing this tribute band, Abbey Road?
We started in 2021, and it's just been a fantastic thing. We're featuring some really well-known people, such as Jay Gepner, who is just Mr. Beatle. He has a wonderful band called Backdated, another wonderful band called Class of '68, and he travels all over the world as a Beatles performer. So we're very fortunate to have Jay in our group, as well as we've got Olya Prohorova on violin, Desi Nenova on cello, Emi Tanabe on violin, Ani Moravec on violin, John Bose on saxophone and flute, Rich Lapka on trombone. We have Chuck Parrish on trumpet and piccolo trumpet, as we just talked about. We have Sean Summer on the bass, doing all the McCartney work. That's so good on the bass. Our drummer is Chris Bean Wang, who's also the drummer of the Bad Examples, a well-known group nationally. It's just, and little old me, I hope I didn't forget anybody. Oh, Ben Lewis is our keyboard player, and we also have Adrian Ruiz as our keyboard player. And Ben is a wonderful jazz musician who has the Ben Lewis Trio, which is such a wonderful ensemble. And then he's also the musical director of the actor Gary Sinise's Lieutenant Dan Band. So we've got some heavy duty hitters, some wonderful players in our Abbey Road ensemble.
How did the Beatles incorporate jazz into their music?
They incorporated just about everything into their music, including jazz. And it goes back to John Lennon and Paul McCartney's songwriting partnership. I mean, it's arguably the greatest pop songwriting partnership in the world, and they were influenced a lot by blues and early rock and roll and jazz. All you have to do is listen to some of the songs in Sgt. Pepper that were very jazz oriented. And then even on the White Album, there was some jazz oriented things. So it was very cool. And I should also probably mention that Abbey Road is one of 7 all-star Grammy tribute bands that I run and play in. We have 11 Grammy Award winners that play with us. So we're very fortunate.
Mhm. What are some of the other bands, the other tribute bands that you have, since we're on the subject now?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, the very first one I started was called Deacon Blues. It's a Steely Dan tribute band. And we've actually flown in Bernard Purdy to perform with us, who was one of the original drummers of Steely Dan and is on a lot of their albums. The second group I started was called Big Suit. That's a Talking Heads tribute, which, by the way, just was nominated. We just became nominees for the Tribute Band of the Year from the Josie Music Awards down in Nashville, which is a very prestigious honor. It's the largest independent music award show in the world. It's an international thing. And
Congratulations.
they had over 56,000 entries for consideration for nomination last year alone. And so we feel very fortunate, and we sort of got a double whammy, because Abbey Road was the second of my bands that just received that honor of being a Josie Music Award nominee. So both Abbey Road and our Talking Heads group, Big Suit, just received that honor. And then
Congratulations.
to finish answering your question, we have a Santana band called Supernatural. We have a group called the Great Pretenders that features the great Suzanne Cross on vocals as Chrissy Hine. We have a group called Prognosis, which features Chris Siebold on guitar, as well as myself, and John Bowes from Abbey Road is in that. John Paul from Tributosaurus is in that group. We have Greg Fundus and Tom Hipskin, who alternate on drums, and Suzanne Cross again is in that. Just a fantastic group. That's progressive rock, such as Peter Gabriel, who's actually a colleague of mine, believe it or not. Genesis, yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Jethro Tull, Tears for Fears, King Crimson, and Supertramp. So that keeps us quite busy. And then the newest one is Retro Radio, and that's everything from the Mamas and the Papas to Seals and Crofts. But let's talk more about the Beatles.
Yes, of course. Well, you said that I saw on the website or where that you know every Beatles song. How you started in 2021, so how did the group practice together? So that how many songs are there to all together anyway? That
Well, I think
yeah.
they wrote, I think they wrote well over 250 songs.
Mhm.
And we're in the process of trying to master the entire catalog, and we're getting pretty close. I will say that, I mean, what could be more universal than the Beatles, you know? I once watched a program on National Public Radio that was interviewing, it was on the history of popular music in the 20th century. And they were interviewing backstage just before they would go on stage. They were interviewing the celebrities that represented opera, orchestral stuff, rock, pop, jazz, as I said, classical, and everything in between. It was all the genres. And the interviewer had one question. And the question to these people was, what, in your opinion, is the most significant event in all of popular music history? And every one of them said, oh, that's easy, the Beatles. So it's absolutely phenomenal that the first rock group ever, you know, because before the Beatles, it was just like the one Hollywood star and the backup group. It was Bill Haley and the Comets, Buddy Holly and the Crickets, Elvis Presley and his backup group. But when the Beatles were presented to the public, they were presented as equals. So they truly were the first rock group. And then, of course, everybody in the music industry that wanted to perform started to make groups, right? But it never ceases to amaze me how their legacy has just grown and grown and grown, and how they've influenced literally every genre of music. So I think it's quite rare that the very first of something continues to this day to be on top, miles and miles above everybody else as far as their reach and their significance.
Mhm. What great contributions from them.
I'm sorry, say it again.
What great contributions from the
Yeah,
Beatles.
absolutely. Just incredible contributions.
When you do the tributes, you say that the sound is so very familiar, very similar, and then, but of course, you do imbue some of your originality into that mix. So how do you balance the two?
Well, that's a really good question. We're trying to be exactly like the record. So
Mhm.
we're not, you know, it's not like some of my other groups where improvisation and jazz techniques are used. This is strictly trying to reproduce exactly what's on the record, the best way that we know how. So we're just trying to be authentic,
Mhm.
which is the reason that we have orchestral members.
Mhm.
You could do it with a synthesizer, right? With an electronic keyboard, but it's just not the same.
Do you take requests as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yes.
especially if we're ever in like a nightclub. But we mostly play theaters.
Mm.
So, it'd be a little bit hard for them to just yell out, what they want to hear. But we mix things up and we have such a great variety. We do it for the most part chronologically, where we start with the early Beatle years, 1963 to 1965. And then we do the middle years when the orchestra started coming in. And then we do some of the experimental stuff towards the end of their career.
Mm. When you played, you said that it was later that they incorporated the orchestral parts into their music. So if you're playing the earlier songs, then does the orchestra stay silent, or do they still
No,
contribute in some
that's a
way?
very good. That's a very good question. The orchestra uh, is probably playing about 70% of the time.
Mhm.
So there are certain songs at the beginning that were before the orchestra came into fruition for the Beatles. So we sort of start with a few of those tunes, maybe four or five or six of those, and then we make the big introduction and bring the strings on stage. And then once they come on, they stay on for the whole rest of the evening.
Mm.
And the same thing with the orchestra. Pardon me, with the horns. And our nickname for the strings are the kaleidoscope strings, and our nickname for the horns are the revolution horns.
Mm.
Uh, and we'll bring on the horns, uh, the song right after we first introduce the strings, then we introduce the horns, and then we do the very first horn song that the Beatles ever did that featured horns, and then the horns remain on stage for the rest of the show.
Did the Beatles have any nickname for their strings group and their horns group?
I don't think they did. So in that situation, I guess we're slightly more creative, but I can't believe I actually just said that. All right. Yeah, no, they didn't have any nickname that I knew of.
Mm.
And interestingly, uh, when I was director of music and theater in the Niles Township Lincolnwood School District, I taught a Beatles class for over 25 years. And that was really fun to teach teenagers about the Beatles.
Where did you teach?
Well, I was just saying the Niles Township system, Niles
Oh,
Township Lincolnwood Schools. Mhm.
wow. Hmm. Those must have been very lucky students to have taken your class.
Well, I became a teacher because I love kids and I love teaching. And to this day, one of the things that teachers, of course, love is when students reach out many years later to let you know the impact that you had on their lives. And it's really funny how many Beatles references I get from former students.
Mhm. When you're playing, who's who represents which Beatles voice of those names
You,
that
you
you
know, we
mentioned?
we we share it a lot. We
Oh,
share it a lot. I I represent a lot of the Paul McCartney voice because I have a very hot, you wouldn't know it with my kind of slightly hoarse voice today. I sang way too much last night,
oh.
but pardon me. Um, but I've got a very high tenor voice, so you know, uh, I do a lot of the high McCartney stuff, and but then again, we share the McCartney stuff with Jay and also with Jim, and I have sort of and I sort of have two John Lennons in the band, so to speak, that are very extremely talented, uh, and they both sound exactly like John. It's just uncanny.
Mm.
Uh, and so yeah, but then again, I give both of them some of the McCartney things as well. So we really mix it up, and some of the George things are sung by the other two as well. Mhm.
Did you have any vocal training?
Did I?
Yes.
Oh yes, I mean I to be a choir director, I would have to, have gotten my degrees in that. So yes,
Mm.
absolutely.
Do you know if the Beatles had any vocal training?
I think they did everything by ear. They were always the first ones to say sheet music. What the heck is sheet music? They couldn't read or write a note of music when they got started. They did everything by ear. I think reading music is really important. And I believe we all read music in Abbey Road, but it's certainly not a prerequisite to have to do that, especially in pop and rock music. In jazz, it's really a necessity as well as in classical music. But for rock and pop, there are so many people that do it completely by ear, and which is fine. Look what the Beatles wrote everything just by ear without formal training, and look where that got them.
So even in their later years, they still were no formal training. They still did not know how to read music.
I think that Paul McCartney ended up getting a little better at it as he ended up doing like an oratorio that he wrote along with the help of a composer and a conductor.
Mm.
So I think they got better at the actual music theory and actual reading music notation as their solo careers went on. But certainly during the entire tenure of the Beatles, they did everything by ear, which makes it even more remarkable.
Wow. When you had your training, and then what did your instructors tell you about the nurturing your voice, healing your voice, such as healing hoarseness, addressing hoarseness?
Yeah, well, it's funny you should ask me that question because I once said to a very well-known famous doctor, Dr. Richard Cash, I said to him one time, I said, I'm fully teaching 6 classes a day, and then I'm directing 125 teenagers after school in a musical play. And my voice is just in shreds by the end of the day because I'm constantly talking. And this doctor of mine, who had like 3,000 active patients in the Chicago area, was just a beloved guy. He had an incredible sense of humor and wit. And I said, Dr. Cash, isn't there something you can prescribe for me, that a medicine of some sort that would make me less hoarse at the end of a teaching day and a directing day with directing over 100 teenagers? And he grabbed his prescription pad and he wrote something down. He folded it over and he handed it to me. I opened it up and it had 2 words on it: shut up. So that was his humor. Then, of course, I'm like, you're my doctor. You can't say that to me. But he was just such a wonderful guy. And then, of course, he said, get one of those microphones that you always see where it wraps around, a headset or whatever. Use the microphone more. Don't just use your voice to try to be heard over 100 teenagers. But no, it's the thing about singing properly is it's all about singing from the diaphragm, from your stomach muscles. When I get hoarse, I can still sing perfectly well. And that always confuses a lot of people, because when your voice gets really, really hoarse, yet you can still sing without a trace of hoarseness, it's like, how does that work? That's because when you speak, it all comes from here, from the throat. But when you sing properly, it all comes from down in your stomach area where the diaphragm is located. So it's from 2 different places.
Did the doctor ever mention that and you could actually speak from the diaphragm as well? Because I know that there are some people that when they're speaking, they project better than other people. Does that mean that they're projecting from the diaphragm while they speak?
I think so. I think probably, sure. That makes sense to me.
Oh,
But in just day-to-day talking, it tends to be more throat oriented than diaphragm oriented.
oh. Well, maybe if it's more diaphragm oriented, then the vocal cords are become less stressed.
Correct.
Maybe.
Correct. You could be a doctor.
Just kind of putting the advice of the doctor together with the like 2 and 2.
Exactly. And I know my time is getting a little bit short,
Okay.
because I actually have a studio session that I'm about to start,
Oh,
but I wanted to, again, thank you for, having me on. And the Wizard WZRD, I love your station and everything about it, in Northeastern University. Um, and just a reminder that, of course, our show is this Thursday
mhm,
with Abbey Road at the Arcata Theater in St. Charles. And we are just we're just such huge fans of that theater and their sister theater, the Des Plaines Theater, all run by the great impresario Ron Onesti and his brother Rich Onesti.
mhm,
The Onesti brothers, they really do such a phenomenal service to all the audiences in this area, because they just continually put smiles on people's faces all the time.
mhm. And the address of the Arcata Theater and for our listeners.
Oh, sure. It's in St. Charles, Illinois. Uh, I believe it's 105 East Main Street, in St. Charles. Let's see, 630 962 7000, I believe, is their phone number. And you can get tickets to all of their shows, not only ours, but everyone's that plays at the wonderful theaters there, at oshows.com. That's the letter O, and then the word shows.com.
And what time is your show begin? Does your show begin?
We're doing a Thursday this time, so it starts a half an hour earlier. 7:30 is the showtime for this Thursday. And
Okay.
then we'll be back with the Onestes and at the Des Plaines Theater on June 21st with Big Suit, our now award-winning, just like Abbey Road, award-winning Talking Heads group, or I should say award-nominated, I should say, Talking Heads group. And that'll be at the Des Plaines Theater on June 21st. Let me just double check I've got the right theater there. Yeah, June 21st, Big Suit at the Des Plaines Theater.
And so our audience, if they want more information about both shows, they will go to, did you say oshows.com?
Yeah, oshows.com is the website for both theaters, the Arcata Theater in St. Charles, where we'll be this Thursday with Abbey Road, and then the Des Plaines Theater.
And if our listeners want to learn more about you and your tribute bands, should they go?
Well, it would be deaconproductions.com. So I'm sorry, how did I get that wrong? It's the name of our company is Deacon Productions. The website is deaconusa.com. So www.deaconusa.com, or the individual websites, which would be abbeyroadbeatles.com or bigsuitmusic.com or deaconblues.com, et cetera. But they can get information on all of our individual all-star Grammy tributes by going to deaconusa.com. That's the global page that they can find the individual websites from there.
Wonderful. And just one more closing question to you. Where do you tour? Do you tour the US? Do you go out of the country as well?
Sure. We started our national tour dates just very recently. Up until now, we've been mostly local and sort of the tri-state area. We play Wisconsin, Iowa, Indiana, and Michigan. But now we're doing national fly dates, and the wonderful notoriety that we've gotten now with the Being Josie Music Award nominees for Tribute Band of the Year
Mhm.
hasn't hurt either. So we're getting interest from national agencies, and we're in negotiations as we speak. So we are national now, and looking to even do more of that. Otherwise, like I said, we play a lot at the Arcata and Des Plaines theaters, but we also do the Park West Theater in Chicago and the Metropolis Theater in Arlington Heights, the Rouse Center for the Performing Arts in Crystal Lake, and some of our favorite places. And they're mostly theaters.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve Kikoen, for joining us on WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM today. Good luck with your shows, and we'll be listening.
Thanks again. Thanks so much for having us on.
Thank you.